All right, good evening. It's October 31st, 2024. This is time and place for the Mount Lebanon Zoning Hearing Board to hear appeal number 1865 for property 306 Beverly Road. Appellant Beverly Partners 306 LLC, Jeff Lavino. Did I say Lavino? Of 306 Beverly Road. The location in question is 306 Beverly Road. And we're here for a design standard validity challenge. In our packet, we have our cover sheet, a receipt of the listing, copy of the advertisement, application, a narrative supporting the validity challenge and variance request. A letter from the Mount Lebanon Municipal Manager to the Zoning Hearing Board. That in summary, the board will be reviewing the zoning ordinance in 2025, and that also if the board chooses to grant a variance, that the board or the municipality would be in favor of the variance. And we have 4 colored photographs. In addition, we have several emails that came in. One from Mary Henning, Henning. In summary, in support of the request of the variance. One from Seth Davis. Also in summary in support of the variance request. One from Joel Beebe, Beeby. Also in summary, in support of the variance. One from Elizabeth Hubry, Hruby, McCabe, McCabe. Also in summary, in support of the variance. And from Greg Boris, Boris, and in summary, in support of the variance. At this time, anybody that is willing or wanting to offer testimony, you could please stand and be sworn in.
You all swear that
Okay, at this time, the appellant would like to approach and offer their testimony.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Chad Michelson. I represent the applicant tonight. We have, as you summarized, a validity challenge and a request for a variance from design standards. I won't spend a lot of time on the validity challenge. It's summarized in the application. Essentially, we believe 704.5.3 essentially regulates color and appearance, which is not authorized under the municipality's planning code and exceeds the municipal authority under the Pennsylvania Constitution. But alternatively, we're seeking a variance. And we believe the building in question here at 306 Beverly Road has unique physical characteristics and that the prohibition on painting that particular brick would cause an unnecessary hardship in this case. We have the applicant here, Mr. Ivino, and the project architect, Maria Wilson. So if the board would allow or prefer, I'd like to present some testimony from architect Wilson to explain the design intent and the issue she faced.
Yes.
Okay. How do you typically handle? Do you want Maria to be up here? Do you want her to sit? How, just informal?
Yeah, if you can, just whoever's speaking, just please come up to the podium.
Well, why don't we share the podium?
And then
Jump on the microphone.
Yep.
And then if you could, just and again, state your name and your either your address or your company for the record.
My name is Maria Wilson. I'm the architect for the project and I live at 529 Hillcrest Place 15216 in the vicinity of the project.
All right, go ahead. You can use the podium.
No.
All right. You're the star. So, Ms. Wilson, would you tell the board, what's your occupation?
I'm an architect, a licensed architect in Pennsylvania,
How long have you been in practice?
more than 20 years.
And in that 20 years, do you have experience with commercial renovations of the type that we're here to talk about
I
tonight?
do. As a matter of fact, I worked on the prior restaurant for Mr. Iovino, the Cafe Io Deli.
So have you worked on other projects in Mount Lebanon?
Yes, sir.
Your office is here, as a matter of fact. Isn't it?
It's Castle Shannon technically, Mount Lebanon Boulevard, yes.
And-
Okay.
It's true. We were doing this. I would tell you not to let me finish my question before you answer. So we'll, and I'll do the same thing. So, you are a resident of Mount Lebanon?
I am a resident.
You live in this neighborhood?
Yes, sir.
So were you responsible for the facade design of this 306 Beverly renovation?
I was.
Does that property have any unique physical characteristics that you had to deal with?
Yes, the building has two facades, one of which was historic and the second had been renovated at some point in time. Additionally, there was significant damage to the facade from prior installation of awnings, electrical conduits, lighting fixtures, et cetera, that had been removed.
Let me show a picture to help orient. There's a picture in the application of the existing facade. I have a blow up, if I might approach.
Yes. Thank you.
So, Ms. Wilson, this photograph I'm placing in front of you is in the application. Is that the existing facade?
It is.
All right, and describe for me the issues you said here, the repairs that were necessary and the problems you had to address on this
You
facade.
can see a clutter of signage, an awning, multiple conduits for electrical fixtures, some of which are usable and some that are not. There was also a stone veneer that was added at some point on the right-hand facade that was not reflected in the historic facade on the left-hand side.
And when we look at this picture, this is a prior use. There are two separate, there's a flower shop and a restaurant, correct?
Correct.
So the proposed new use, how does that differ from this existing use?
The new use would incorporate the flower shop and the restaurant as a single-use space.
So the entire first floor of the building would now be one consolidated use as opposed to two different businesses?
Correct, one consolidated restaurant.
And how does that impact your ability to, how does it impact your design decisions?
The intent of the design was to unify this facade as a single entity and to emphasize the primary entrance to the facade while maintaining a secondary means of egress.
You mentioned the repairs that would be necessary because of these fixtures and because of the damage that's over time. What kind of challenges do you face in repairing a 100-year-old building that is in this condition?
We have difficulty matching the brick and the mortar, so painting the building would allow us to conceal any inconsistencies in that facade.
So in light of those, you developed a solution, a proposed facade renovation?
We did.
Again, may I approach? This photograph is a rendering of the facade. It's also in the application. Ms. Wilson, could you explain to the board the design intent behind this facade shown in this photograph?
Certainly. So the intents of the design were to unify the street level facade to create one consistent pedestrian access point for the new use. While we still maintain the entrance and egress for the second floor activities. Additionally, we wanted to replace the lighting, make it more consistent and illuminate the sidewalk for pedestrian access and safety, and repair all of the damage to the brick, removing the unnecessary conduit, et cetera, and painting the building to conceal that. We're replacing that stone that was added to the building at some point, but not historic in nature, with some columns and marble to match the existing and to make it consistent with the other buildings on the streetscape.
Okay, let me slow down a little bit. The facade, the storefront on the right-hand side is the one where you're replacing the cladding, the brick,
Correct,
the thin brick.
correct. The three columns on the right, the door is in the remaining location and a new window that is operable
Okay.
at the restaurant.
Now, in light of these physical conditions you've described, the need to consolidate the sort of building in from two uses into one, the damage to the facade. How does your decision to paint the facade relate to those conditions?
It allows us to conceal the repairs. It also protects the brick and the mortar from additional damage. We were able to look at other options to conceal them, such as cladding, siding, vinyl, etc., but we didn't feel that they were appropriate to the neighborhood.
Okay, and those other solutions, where do you install some sort of cladding or some sort of siding? What impact would that have on the brick facade beneath?
It would do additional damage to attach the cladding to the building.
You also said that you were looking to contextualize the building. Oh, one other unique physical characteristic. This building is currently unpainted, correct?
Yes,
Does that make it unique in this neighborhood?
it is. There are multiple buildings on the streetscape, both sides of the street that are painted. I've given you some photographs.
Okay, so let's use these. We have several sets. May I? Not all of these photographs are in the application, so I propose to mark the packet potentially as an exhibit, would that be appropriate? Is that okay?
Yes.
All right. So I think we have 5 photographs here. Maria, I'm going to give you these.
All right.
We're going to walk through these
Yes,
and
sir.
sort of explain how they relate to your design. So what's the first photograph we're looking at, the Benjamin Moore store?
The first photograph is the paint store, which is to the right of the facade that we're discussing. There's a building or 2 buildings in between, or a building in between. But the columns and the side of the building are all painted at that location.
Okay, so we've got a painted brick. This is the same side as our proposed use.
Correct.
Same side of the street. All right, the next photograph,
Connects the paint store that we just looked at to our proposed building just to the left of the cedar shake roof.
so in this photograph, we can see the Benjamin Moore on the right. We can also see 306 Beverly on the left.
Correct.
All right, and what does this depict in terms of why you'd like to paint the building?
The adjacent building is painted, the windows as well as the brick. We're trying to distinguish our building from the others on the street and make it less contiguous.
So you have the Benjamin Moore building that's red, and you have the painted building next to it that's this beige color, right?
Correct.
And so your design intent would be to use a different color on the other side of this beige building.
Correct.
Let's look at, I think we might be able to skip this picture.
Yeah, the
third
next building,
picture's
the
probably
next
the
picture
same.
is similar.
Let's look at the 4th picture. That's the Botto storefront.
4 pictures across the street at the Batto's Restaurant location. It has a similar facade in the just painted brick. It has a noticeable signboard and columns at the street level to make it more pedestrian friendly.
How did this have any impact on any of your design decisions?
It did. We like the idea of the painted brick as well as again, the signboard and the columns that bring the scale of the building down to the pedestrian.
And what's your last picture depict?
The last picture is a little bit further up the street on the other side, for the Suburban Dry Cleaners Inner Light Building, which has also been painted, in recent times, has a similar distinguished, first floor facade, enunciating the, permeability of the first floor.
All right, so Ms. Wilson, if the applicant is unable to paint this brick, what are your options to address these existing physical conditions?
We are permitted to install a cladding over the building. We could consider siding of some nature. However, we're concerned about the contextualization of that product as well as the damage to the existing brick. The other option would be to leave it as it is, and we would have to live with the damage and the repairs that we're making to the building based on past design decisions.
Is there any economic hardship to the applicant in terms of having to pursue one of those options as opposed to painting?
Yes, the installation of a cladding product would certainly be more costly to the applicant than the paint. And the paint would protect the brick in the long term versus causing additional damage.
Okay, I think that's all the questions I have for you, Ms. Wilson. I appreciate
Thank
it. Any questions from the board?
Well, what was the deterioration in the brick?
I'm sorry?
What was deteriorated in the brick?
The
And what
What's the
exactly?
nature of the deterioration? of the brick?
deterioration of the brick, there's some deterioration in the mortar just from basic weathering, but most of the damage was from prior electrical installations that were drilled through the brick, as well as some old awnings that were installed on the second floor windows, things of that nature.
And the inconsistencies in the brick that you mentioned?
Yes, so if we were to patch the brick, there will be inconsistencies between the new work and the old work.
And you couldn't match it.
No, I don't believe so.
When was the building last repointed, do you know?
I do not know the
Was it
answer, I'm
ever
sorry.
Repointed?
I do not know that.
Our,
Not in your ownership, correct?
I question whether any clad or painted building could survive 100 years, the way this facade has. I'm just,
Sure.
not really clear that it was absolutely necessary to paint.
Ms. Wilson, are some of the holes and some of the damage in the brick as opposed in the mortar?
Some of them are,
Yeah.
yes. Some of them are through the brick, they're penetrations for utility purposes.
So to protect the building, the process to patch that brick would be to install mortar or something in the brick to seal those holes,
Correct,
correct? And that's what you're talking about not being able to match.
correct.
So we'd have sort of a splotchy kind of.
Right, patches in the existing brick.
Facade. That's the real.
Was any effort given to looking for matching brick?
We did look for matching brick, and we're not able to find anything that was 100% matched, so we could certainly get close, but not enough.
And so to be fair, we talked about patching the holes in the brick. The question would be, what if you were to take out those bricks with holes and replace those? Is that a far more expensive endeavor?
It's more expensive, but it would also be more obvious, because even the aging of the brick changes the color, so new brick versus old brick will not, it's consistent.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Honestly, that's the extent of the application. I mean, we think the unique physical characteristics are in fact the age of the building, the condition that needs to be remedied. And of course, we reserve the validity challenge as well, which is in the application. Are there any questions or anything we can answer for you?
Mr. Conti, any other additional questions?
Just looking to see. No, you didn't investigate repointing at all for the damaged areas?
We can repoint the mortar, but not correct the issues in the bricks themselves.
The issues with the bricks themselves.
Right. Yeah, to be fair, it's not just we could certainly repoint, it wouldn't solve the issues. That the unique physical characteristic is the damage to the bricks, not that it needs to be repointed.
I have a few questions.
Right.
So earlier you mentioned, that, the building has never been repointed in your ownership. When did you take ownership?
If you're gonna talk, can you come up to the mic just so it's caught on?
We took ownership in 2021.
Okay, thank you. And, back to I guess the unique physical circumstance. I understand that the brick is aging and is deteriorating, but there's a lot of brick facaded buildings in Mount Lebanon of similar age. So how is the fact that it's just it's old and it's deteriorated, how does that make that unique?
I think it's twofold. First of all, it's unique in that it's the brick on this street is painted. In this commercial district, all of the other brick almost is painted. And the reason for that is because in a commercial district, it's far different than an apartment building or something residential. Over the years, all of these buildings have had new signage, different uses, awnings, lighting. The kinds of things that get installed on these commercial buildings are different, I think, than a lesser or less intensive use. And so you get more damage. And at some point, after 100 years, in order to remedy that, your options become significantly more limited.
All right, thank you.
Well, I guess I could ask one more thing. The photos that we have show the facade partially painted. Could you give us a history of all of this?
Sure. I mean, it's relatively simple. I could offer the testimony. I'll just give you a summary, and if we need to give you testimony, we will. But an inquiry was made to the building code officials about this facade renovation, about signage permits, about painting. And while that was under consideration, the contractor started to move forward with painting. And the code officials said you don't have approval for that, it stopped, and that's where we are today.
Did the owner stop the contractor?
Well, the owner wasn't aware of this relatively unique requirement of the ordinance. It's a pretty obscure part of the zoning ordinance, and so the owner didn't know.
The owners had other buildings on the street.
But not that they'd never come across this issue of painted. And the other building, they own three of the where
Yeah,
is painted.
we got there in 2005. We were a tenant at 300 and starting it in 2005. And that building was painted in the time we were a tenant there. So to be honest, we didn't think of it. We were trying to solve problems, work efficiently and
Did the plans submitted for approval for renovations? You needed a building permit for renovations. Did the plans include a note that the facade was to be painted?
yeah, the picture was submitted
I think,
this picture was submitted in June.
but the plans, there were approved plans. There's a building permit issued. Everything's been done in connection or in conformity with the plans. Those plans don't disclose the facade, the painting of the facade. Is that right? There's no note on the drawings, correct, Maria?
Correct. There
Okay.
were some changes to the scope of work that were made after construction was started. A plan was submitted to Mr. Meyer in June. And work began in September, and at that point, we were notified that it was not permissible. We had not received a reply to the questions we had inquired with back in June.
So the fact that it's 2/3 painted is on the contractor, and the contractor
Potentially.
isn't here.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily relevant to the question here tonight. I mean, it does, it's a significant issue practically, but just in terms of the law and the standards that the board would apply. It's not a pre-existing condition or anything.
I'll take it.
Well, I mean, right, the question is whether it can be painted, not what would happen if you said there's no variance. That would be an issue for the code officials.
All right, you're aware of our 5 criteria that we need to
Correct.
grant a variance. We kind of touched on the first one. I want to visit the second one, which is because of the physical circumstances, there's no possibility that the property can be developed or used or enable reasonable use of the property. So could you touch on if we do not grant a variance or concur of the validity issue, could you touch on how that would inhibit reasonable use of the property?
So the answer to that is twofold. First of all, as we said, it's a commercial building. So the appearance of the commercial building is very important. And if we're unable to do this and forced to do something like siding or something else, that also is problematic in terms of not fitting into the neighborhood and not, it's not good for the neighborhood, it's not good for the business. But I would say also that when you apply the 5 criteria here, it does sort of go to the validity challenge, right? The reason that things like color aren't regulated or shouldn't be regulated is because they don't actually fit these criteria, right? It's color doesn't rise to the level of public health and safety that the police power of the municipality is entitled to regulate through the zoning ordinance. And so when you regulate something like that, and then you ask, what is the hardship? The test just doesn't apply. So I think there's a relationship between the validity challenge and the strict application of each of those factors. But the real problem is that absent being able to paint this building, you're left with a building that doesn't appear to be unified for the single business, that's the use, that's the approved use. And isn't going to be consistent with the neighborhood in terms of trying to repair the damage that this applicant did not create. And that's the physical condition that exists that we did not create.
In the event of a kind of like a no action, kind of do nothing, no new siding or new cladding, what would be anticipated? What would the anticipated effects on the building be?
Let's see, you mean in its current condition?
Correct.
Well-
If you leave the building kind of as it is, kind of if it was remained unpainted for another 50, 100 years, what would happen?
The building would further deteriorate. I mean, you have to do something to protect it. We'd seal those holes. It would continue to be essentially an eyesore on that district, right? We want to maintain this 100-year-old building. So the impact, if something isn't able to be done, and if the variance isn't granted, the applicant's gonna have to consider something, right? And we don't want to consider things that aren't, as Ms. Wilson said, contextual. So in 50 or 100 years, what's the problem? Its problem is that it ends up looking almost like a blighted building in one of the most important commercial districts of Mount Lebanon.
All right, thank you. I have no further questions.
Well, yeah, are we still talking about the variance or are we talking about the validity appeal?
Well, we were talking about the variance. I know I mentioned the validity appeal. I'm happy to talk about that if you'd like. Yeah, so again, in the application, we've cited some case law. But you know, the zoning is an exercise of police power, right? And the municipality has the right to do things to protect the public health and safety, but there are limits to that. And the Pennsylvania courts have said, in the case that we include in the application, that regulating things like appearance, which is strictly what this is, it's color, right? It's a brick building, so we'll always have a brick building. This regulation is essentially saying you can't have a brick building of a certain color. And when faced with those types of ordinances, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has said that those fly in the birthright of liberty and our American way of life. They overstep the bounds of the municipality's authority under the Constitution. And that's not the main point here. The main point here is think about how difficult it is to apply what you do every day in enforcing the code to something like color. It's a far different thing than uses or than area variances, dimensional variances. Those kinds of things have a certain weight that color doesn't. And regulating appearance in this way is arbitrary and inconsistent because we're allowed to put cladding on that building, right? We could put up hot pink vinyl siding, which we would never do, but the zoning code would allow that. And so when you wade into those kinds of regulations of appearance, that's when you get those sorts of problems. And that's why the case law says that there's a limit to regulating appearance. So we think just that narrow section of the code about the unpainted brick has gone outside of the municipality's authority.
Validity appeal, you list things that you are challenging. And the last line, I think, said something about, what was it? How did you phrase that? I'm sorry.
It's okay. Let's see. That the buildings in other districts are treated more favorably?
No, you had a list where you suggested, I thought, that you were challenging the idea of building standards.
Oh,
I'm looking for the exact wording here and
well, I will tell you, we are not trying to challenge the municipal design standards or the guidelines.
Design standards.
No, not in the least. It's merely section 704.5.3 of the guidelines in NOS for non-residential buildings.
In the validity appeal,
Right.
you
So
are only talking about painting.
we are only talking about section 704.5.3 of that design guidelines. So
Yes.
very narrow, and it's simply that small section that,
Which is the painting, right?
that's correct. That is the section that says.
Yeah.
Right. In the C1 and CBD districts, no unpainted masonry or brick may be painted if originally designed
Okay.
to be unpainted. So that is the only provision that's the subject to the validity challenge.
All right. Anybody in the audience, if you'd like to provide testimony, please come up. Again, if you can, state your name and address for the court reporter.
My name is Patrick Cousins. I'm a resident of 645 Overlook Drive. This property is at the intersection of Beverly and Overlook. I've lived in that neighborhood for 21 years. It's an incredibly important part of my life. Both my children have gone to Lincoln Elementary. Beverly Road is a really special place. I am, in full transparency, a financial partner with Jeff Iovino in this. And because one, he's a dear friend, but also because I have so much love and appreciation for Beverly Road and what it can be. And in this process, what this building, in its current state, two different buildings, it had been modified on the one side with stone veneer from the 1960s and 70s. We're trying to restore it back to a very historical image. You can see the rendering that Maria put together, utilizing paint to bring a historic appearance to it. And you guys have talked about the legality of this, and I think, they have a strong standing on that. But just from a heartfelt point, and the 4 or 5 emails that you received from other residents near here, I mean, Beverly is such a special place. And all we are trying to do is make it an even more special place. And we have put such great care and attention into, while trying to manage budget, you cannot find matching brick to this glazed brick. That was probably a special brick that was made in the 30s when this building was built. Such care and attention putting and making this fit in historically with Mount Lebanon. Colored and painted brick has been around for centuries. Some of the most popular places in the US and around the world are painted brick. You go to Charleston, South Carolina, one of the most historically significant towns in our country. Rainbow Row is a street of homes that were built, and townhomes built in the 1600s and 1700s. They're all painted different colors and have brought such a historical value and uniqueness to that. And we have the same thing on Beverly Road and on Washington Road in this business district. More than most of the buildings in Beverly are already painted. We're trying to fit that. And all we're trying to do is make Mount Lebanon and Beverly Road a special place. And if you walk past Iovino's and see the excitement that people have for what he's doing, Jeff has been a proprietor on the street for 17 years. Cafe Io was in a painted brick building. It is now Panadaria Jasmine. That building was painted. Most of those buildings are painted. We really are just trying to do something special for our neighborhood and make Mount Lebanon and Beverly Road a destination for people in Mount Lebanon and our neighborhood. It's such a walking community, but the buzz around Pittsburgh as people are so excited for this. I'd be heartbroken if we were in a position that we have to put up siding. And we know this has happened on Washington Road at David Allen. And, I hope Mount Lebanon takes under consideration this variance, this zoning code that was put in place in some time in the last decade or so. But painted brick is special. And, and I hope our zoning committee manages that going forward, but allows it. It is special. That's all I have to offer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask one more?
Ask me a question?
No.
Oh, sure.
Hi, Dustin Coleman. I live at 470 Arden Road. Also in the Lincoln neighborhood. I'm not financial partners with Jeff, but he's a good friend. Both my kids also went to Lincoln. Obviously have spent countless hours on Beverly Road. Countless hours in Jeff's restaurant and, all the establishments up there. It's a very special place for me as well. And, there have been a lot of improvements over, the last several years there. And, I've really enjoyed the way that commercial district has evolved, and it's just getting better now. And, with some of the recent moves that have happened associated with the restaurants on Jeff's side of the street, we're all just really excited to see the improvements happen and to spend more time up there. And, just my opinion, the renderings look fantastic, and, I'm certainly in support of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
I did have one more question. Keith McGill sent us a letter suggesting that the commission and I believe himself felt that we should grant a variance on this. But he suggested also that we get a guarantee that any painted facade would be maintained. Paint doesn't last 100 years the way brick and mortar does. Paint may last 20 years, 30, I don't know. But some of us may still be around when the paint starts to blister and so on.
I can offer this. I was involved with 300 Beverly Road since 2005, and in that time, the first landlord painted it, and then we were responsible for keeping it up. And we've in that window, that 17-18-year window, we've already done it twice. This building, we purchased this. I'm all in on this investment, so I'm not going to let it go. I need this thing to make me a living for a long time. So I am,
You're willing to commit to.
I'm willing to commit to
Maintaining
maintaining
that
it and keeping it, and I'll probably, like I try to do with everything, and try to have my standards just a step higher than what's required. And I 100% agree to that.
Thank you. Mr. Sarver, is there anybody online?
I do not believe so.
Mr. Sarver, do you offer the municipality stance?
So, to summarize, Mr. Iavino he owns that building and the one adjacent to it. And earlier this year, he began process of basically reorganizing the businesses within those two buildings, and the proposed renovation of such. So we issued permits and plans for that, and he began the work. It was during one of our visits that we noticed that the building started to be painted. So our inspector stopped in, advised them that that's against the zoning ordinance. He stopped. We did not write any violation notices. We did not write any stop work orders. We double checked the plans that were approved for the renovations. There was no details as far as the front facade, whether or not it would be painted or not. There was a note on the drawings that a front facade drawing was included in the set, but it wasn't included in the approved set. So it might have been on a drawing, but we just never seen it as far as the approved set. They, after being advised that that was a violation of the zoning ordinance, they proceeded to file the validity challenge and or variance that's in front of you tonight. And as you read the emails in support of, as well as the letter from the municipal manager, this ordinance was created back as a comprehensive review of the zoning ordinance in 2005. So before that, there was no ordinance that you could not paint brick. So this basically came to fruition in 2005. And then since then, I only know personally of two cases where we ran into this. One was mentioned tonight with David Allen, where it was shown on their prints. We advised them that they could not paint it. The contractor made a mistake, painted it, and then they ended up siding over it rather than washing off the paint. The second one is across the street with the stone, which I believe came before the board, I'm gonna say 2 years ago, roughly, where that variance was granted to paint that. Since then, the owner has failed to act on the variance, so the variance is invalid now because more than 12 months have gone by, but a variance was granted, so.
Right, Mr. Conti, any questions for Mr. Sarver? I don't have any questions as well. Any questions for the appellant? I don't as well. I think at this time we'll enter executive session. Could pause the record till we return.
Yeah.
All right, we are prepared to vote. So we're gonna vote on each independently on the validity challenge first and then the variance second. So Mr. Conti, how do you vote on the validity challenge?
I vote no, I vote to reject it.
As do I. On the variance request, Mr. Conti, how do you propose to vote?
Considering the suggestion from the municipal manager, I vote in favor of a variance.
I also vote in favor of the variance with the condition that the paint be maintained in good condition and any peeling, flaking, or bubbling paint will be corrected in a reasonable time frame.
What are you looking for with that? Exactly. Is it like so many years, like the time to count, or is it just for you to keep it?
Just- If it's,
Keep it nice, the zoning officer.
Correct. if the condition is, if the paint's flaking or peeling or bubbling, then that it be corrected.
Which there are existing ordinances on the books that regulate that, so.
I just wanted to add a thought that despite my suspicion of arguments that brick doesn't last and that mortar can't be matched or brick can't be matched and so on, I really don't buy that. But I do think you've done a wonderful job on that street over the years and really done a lot to improve it. I think this is an excellent design and will be very welcome there by me as well as most other people around here. I think it's a real improvement.
That was all our goal, or just, it's very simple, I'm not a man of many words, but it's very simply just trying to prove what we had, reinvesting
Well-
in ourselves.
Well, I think you've done good. Okay.
Thanks very much.
All right. Thank you. And this concludes our record.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too. Happy Halloween. Awesome.